When it first emerged in 1941, Luftwaffe officials were astounded by the superior combat performance of a brand new aircraft introduced by the Brits, the de Havilland DH.98 Mosquito. This light and blazingly fast bomber, constructed mostly of wood, was often able to break through German defenses effortlessly to strike its targets. Of the British plane, Hermann Göring famously said, quote, "It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy." The British, who can afford aluminum better than we can, knocked together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building, and they gave it a speed which they have now increased yet again. What do you make of that? The Luftwaffe so badly wanted an aircraft with similar potency that they would build their own, even giving it the same name. The new Focke-Wulf Ta 154 would be called the Mosquito, spelled Moskito. British bombing raids. By September of 1939, before the invasion of Poland, the Luftwaffe had one of the most powerful air forces in Europe. It was only surpassed by the French and the British fleets. Still, the Luftwaffe built its air force only with short-term conflicts in mind. They were mainly armed to fight weaker countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other Eastern European nations. Knowing that they were significantly outnumbered by the British Royal Air Force and the French Army combined, the Luftwaffe did not intend to engage in full frontal combat with them. But after the Blitzkrieg campaign's initial victories, Britain and France declared war against Germany, and the Luftwaffe's strategy changed. France soon surrendered, but the British counterattacked and kept fighting with all their might. In the summer of 1940, the British Royal Air Force, or RAF, launched strategic bombing missions deep inside Germany to destroy their factories and halt war production. The British also intended to terrorize the German civilian population by bombing cities of no operational value. These actions would reduce morale and force Germany to withdraw its troops from several European fronts. In the spring of 1942, British Bomber Command launched Operation Millennium. It was a massive raid with the objective to bomb the city of Cologne. By June of 1942, the British RAF would also bomb the cities of Essen and Bremen. The British aircraft formations initially ranged from 100 to 300 bombers, but eventually escalated from 500 to 1,000. The damage to German cities was significant, and there were thousands of civilian casualties. Wooden Wonder. The RAF had a key advantage over its German counterpart in the form of the twin-engine DH-98 Mosquito multi-role aircraft. This new war asset had been recently introduced as an unarmed fast bomber, but its functions would evolve as the war progressed. The Mosquito could operate at altitudes of 8,000 to 9,000 meters, reach speeds between 430 and 600 kilometers per hour, and carry a 2,000-kilogram bomb load. Such assets were possible because of the Mosquito's twin Rolls-Royce Merlin 21 engines and its wooden construction. This unusual buildup made the aircraft very light and would earn it the nickname of Wooden Wonder. The Mosquito would eventually perform as a low to medium altitude daytime technical bomber and a high altitude night bomber, among other intruder and recon tasks. During the bombing of Cologne, German defenses were overwhelmed by the sheer power and speed of the Mosquito and could only knock down 4% of the entire attacking force. A new night fighter. The Luftwaffe responded to the British attacks with the formation of a night fighter wing called the Nachtjagd. It was composed mainly of Junkers Ju-88 and Bf-109 fighters, along with other German aircraft. Still, German officers believed that their fleet was not enough to hold out the British forces. In the summer of 1942, Generalfeldmarschall Erhard Milch, Minister of Air Armaments, held a meeting with Luftwaffe officials to discuss the possibility of building a German equivalent of the British Mosquito. Milch called on the Air Ministry's top brass to issue a requirement for an aircraft with superior performance than the Mosquito, but still made of homogeneous wood and using the UMO 211 engines. In September of 1942, Focke-Wulf's manufacturer came forward with a design and presented it to the Air Ministry. The proposal involved building a high-speed, dual-engine bomber and night fighter made of 50% wood, 40% steel, and 10% of other materials. The company got the contract and began working on the project immediately. The aircraft prototype was initially called Ta 154, or Focke-Wulf's night fighter, but was eventually allocated the name Mosquito. By early 1943, an urgent meeting was held to discuss the future of the aircraft's production. Luftwaffe officials pointed out that there were not enough skilled woodworkers in Germany to produce such large amounts of aircraft. Also, the standard UMO 211 engine would not be enough to surpass the British Mosquito's latitude. Still, the first prototype was finished by July. It had fuselage-mounted horizontal stabilizers, shoulder-mounted wings, a tricycle landing gear arrangement, and its desired wing all-out wood composition. The Mosquito was equipped with flame dampers to constrain engine noise and decrease flame visibility from the exhaust of the engines. The first variant lacked any armament. On July 1, 1943, the Mosquito was tested by experienced pilot Hans Sander. He later claimed that the aircraft was easier to control than the Henkel Tu-19 and the Junkers Ju-388 fighters. Still, the Mosquito was underpowered, as it was not carrying a radar or weapons. The third version of the Mosquito was armed with two Mk108 30mm cannons and two MG151 20mm cannons with 200 and 300 rounds each. The V-3 was tested in October of 1943 by German pilot Hauptmann Thierfelder. He later reported that fuselage pieces fell off from the aircraft while he fired the guns. This issue raised concerns among Air Ministry officials regarding the lack of trained workers who had experience with the Mosquito's bonding materials. A lack of bonding resin in Germany was also a distressing factor. The delivery of upgraded UMO 213 engines was eventually halted when the V-1 and V-3 Mosquitoes suffered crashes related to weak landing gears and their faulty hydraulic system. And in May of 1944, an eighth version of the Mosquito crashed, and a pilot lost his life. By the end of the month, British RAF bombers destroyed the Mosquito factory in the Posen province. The Goldschmidt Company premises, which produced the glue used in the Mosquitoes, was also reduced to ashes. During the Mosquito pre-production phase, more than 15 prototypes had been built to perform tests with multiple setups. According to future intel, the British had discovered that the Germans were trying to replicate their Mosquito aircraft and feared that the enemy would design a more powerful fighter. The problems kept piling up for the unfinished Mosquito. Further tests revealed that the Mk108 cannons could not support the recoil of a larger caliber gun, so they were removed from future prototypes. In July of 1944, a plywood glue replacement proved to be defective. It was corrosive and chemically reacted with the wood, leading to wing failure due to plywood delamination. After so many problems and technical limitations, the Air Ministry canceled the Mosquito project in August of 1944. Mosquito fallout. About 80 Mosquitoes had been built by the time the project was canceled. Some were left to gather dust at German airfields, while others were destroyed during the frequent Allied bombing raids of the last months of 1944. Several Mosquitoes were part of a night fighter squadron along with Ju-88 and He-219 fighters. They all sported a light blue fuselage as a camouflage tactic, but German air forces ultimately relied on Messerschmitt Bf-110Gs and Junkers Ju-88s as night fighters to break Allied bomber formations. After the war ended in 1945, the United States could only find one intact Mosquito, which had been left behind with a stack of jet engines waiting to be scrapped. Other surviving Mosquitoes in eastern Germany were destroyed before the Soviets raced for the frontier. One of the incomplete Mosquitoes was meant to be a Pulsdestroyer or formation destroyer aircraft. According to Jack Beckett from War History Online, this unique version was, quote, a system whereby the entire forward fuselage ahead of the fuel tanks was filled with Amatol high explosive. A new and extremely small cockpit for the pilot was added to the airframe directly ahead of the tail fin. From this cramped cabin, the pilot would fly the bomb Mosquito into an Allied bomber formation, arm the onboard charges, and quickly bail out. A timer would then detonate the explosives a few seconds later. The fragmentation charges would wreak havoc in American and British B-17 flying fortresses with minimal German casualties, but the idea never materialized. A replica of the forward sections of the Mosquito V-3 can be appreciated at the Luftwaffe Technisches Museum in Rechtland, Germany, while other aircraft from the German Night Fighter Squadron can be found at the British Royal Air Force Museum in London. In the end, the British Mosquito and the German Mosquito would never meet each other in the fight for air dominance over Europe.